Basically, I studied art for 5 years for a diploma, so I studied illustration and graphics. Now, people either do graphics or illustration, but I was gifted in both, so I could draw linotype, typography, and also mix that with imagery as well. And I was a rather adept airbrush artist by the time I was 21. I knew that I wanted to do record sleeves, and I was always creative anyway. So to cut long story short, I bumped into a guy called Carl Bonney, and he was starting a band called Renegade Soundwave, and they were signed to Rhythm King, fronted by the MD called Martin Heath. And he said, I walked in, he said, he got the job straight away. He said, what else have you got in your books? He said, well, I've got Beatmasters, S-Express, Bomb the Bass, would you like to do the sleeves? And I'm 23, I've been out of college a year. So basically I jumped from advertising to starting to do that. I had a friend in Ealing called Kev Lou. He had a hairdresser, a bit of a hip character. And he knew this renegade called Paul Dennis. And his friend was Gary Haisman. And he said, oh yeah, we know this mad northerner who's really good at cartoons, and he's just started to do record sleeves, and he'll do your flyer. And they said, Paul and Gary wanted to start a nightclub called The Raid. And it was through The Raid that I eventually met Paul Oakenfold and Ian St. Paul, because Gary was heavily involved with Spectrum and he dropped out. Gary never got his due credit for that. And they came round and Gary went, he's going, or a big eye, heaven on earth like that Spectrum. And that's all he did. So I just recently bought a book called The Art of Rock, which is about £48. It was literally all the flyers, psychedelic flyers and posters from Haight-Ashbury, going right the way back to The Happenings by Ken Kesey, who wrote Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and he did the Magical Mystery Trip on his bus with the words Further written on the front. Believe me, I'm an old art student and acid head. Trust me, I know. I was immersed in this, and Ken Kesey and, Owsley, all the rest of it. The border and the psychedelia of Spectrum, the border was directly taken with due reverence by Rick Griffin, and he was one of the artists for the Grateful Dead, and he was one of the top psychedelic artists in Haight-Ashbury during the early 60s. Stanley and Mouse, they were other artists as well. They did these stunning, beautiful bordered, this all sort of almost Victoriana lettering, but it was Gary who said, pull the focus, I want the big trippy eye. And I had to invent the way that I did the lettering as if it was the eye above and below it, and then I came out with a faded sky. And I mean, to print a full colour flyer that says Monday 11th of April, and it's defunct after 11th of April. It wasn't even a generic, rather than putting Mondays, this was 4 colour prints, matte laminated with a giveaway 3 A3 poster, and that's on 4 metal plates. That's lithographic print. Do you know how much that cost? That's £6,000 worth of print in 1988. This is not pronto print where it's digitally pissed out on a bloody glorified colour photocopier. They had to make the plates, mix the ink by hand and print it. On the back I actually paid reference to Ken Kesey, have you passed the acid test? So you actually saw that, and so have you passed a Kool-Aid acid test? So I think about maybe 4% of the crowd got it. I'm a little art student at the time, and I'd fully read about, fascinated with American counterculture. Anyway, I'd read heavily about that, strobe lighting, hot oil lamps or whatever, and I saw the second coming again. Dayglow was on the march, everybody was starting to wear that, and that's why I designed Spectrum like that. But the flyer before that was Future, and that was held at Soundshaft at the back of this place, and that was in early 88. I think it was late 87. And I'd also designed the flyer for Rage next door on a Thursday night. They were both on a Thursday night. So I was one of the few of the bouncers allowed to walk between one club and the other. But in Rage, it was the first beginnings of Time Stretch, Goldie, that whole sort of drum and bass. So you would go next door, it was 90% black, all wearing M1 jackets like that, and then you'd go next door and we were singing All You Need Is Love with dungarees on. It's in the V&A, yeah. There's 3 being credited, which are on permanent record. Basically, I think it was shown in high regard for the 80s. I mean, everybody said it was the smiley face, which I thought, I'm not saying anything to humour, it was a bit naff. If you push me per se, I would prefer Future, because Future was so innocent. I mean, I was dancing next to Mr. C from, what's his name, Mr. C? The Shaman, and he's got a fur coat on, and at 5 in the morning he said, where are you off to? He said, I've got to go on my milk round.